At times like these, we need stories of generosity of spirit, generosity of heart. It's just a pity that I don't have a story about generosity for you. Rather, I've got a story about miserliness for you. For this is a story from Pakistan called The Two Misers, and this is how I will tell it to you. There was a village in Pakistan that didn't have a miser. Sorry, I phrased that badly. There was a village in Pakistan that didn't have a miser. It had two misers. And these two misers were known for their meanness. Their meanness with their wallets, the meanness with their hearts, the meanness of their spirits. And so no one wanted to be with either of them, the younger or the older miser. Neither of them got invited to weddings, neither of them got invited to funerals, neither of them got invited to birthdays. They were never invited anywhere. And the younger miser looked up to the older miser as a pattern for his life, to show him how a true miser can live. So he was really surprised when the older miser came to him one day and said, "My friend, I think it's time that I invited you for a meal." And the younger miser looked at him and said, "Me? But I've never been invited by you for a meal." And the older miser said, "I know, and it weighs heavily on my heart." And the younger miser says, "Then yes, I will come for a meal, but I put one condition on me being your guest." An unusual thing to do to your host. But the older miser said, Tell me what your condition is." And the younger miser said, "I must choose what we eat." The older miser thought about that. Very well. So the two of them went into the village, and as they walked into the village, people moved apart as they walked down the street. But as they were walking down the street, something that did come close to them was a smell. A smell carried on the breeze of freshly baking bread. And the younger miser said, "Milk bread! That is the smell of milk bread, and I have not eaten milk bread since I was a child. That's what I want to eat. I want to eat milk bread." And the older miser said, "Then that, my friend, is what you will eat." And so he led him to the baker's. And at the baker's there was a queue of people because the milk bread was so good. But of course, I told you, no one wanted to be with the misers. So when they joined the end of the queue, the person in front of them decided they'd go and do their shopping somewhere else for the moment. And then the person in front of them, the person in front of them, until very quickly the two misers were standing at the counter in the baker's. And the older miser said, "My young friend here tells me that your milk bread is delicious." And the baker said, "Your young friend is right." And the older miser said, "My young friend here says that your milk bread is the sweetest milk bread." And the baker said, "Your young friend is right. For my milk bread is as sweet as butter." And the older miser looked at him, and then looked at his young friend, and then looked back at the baker and said, "It is as sweet as butter. But butter is cheaper than milk bread. And if I want something that is as sweet as butter and costs as much as butter, then I will buy butter." And he took his protesting young friend by the hand and led him from the baker's and down the street. And down the street they went until they came to the butter cellar. And in the butter cellar shop there were jars of butter. Golden, rich butter. And the older miser said to the butter seller, "Sir, how good is your butter?" And the butter seller said, "My butter is the best butter in this village." And the older miser said, "Your butter is the only butter sold in this village." But the butter seller said, "But sir, look at it, how rich, how golden it is, how smooth it is." "Ah," said the older miser, "it's smooth. Is it as smooth as oil?" And the butter seller said, "If any butter could be as smooth as oil, then mine would be the closest you would find to it, for my butter is almost as smooth as oil." And the older miser looked at him, and looked at his young friend, and looked back and said, "But if I want something that is as smooth as oil, Then I will buy something that costs no more than oil. We will have oil for our meal. And he took his protesting friend, the young miser, by the hand and led him from the butter seller's shop and down the street until they came to the oil shop. And when they went in the oil shop, there were jugs of oil. Clear, beautiful oil. And the old miser said, "Tell me, how good is your oil?" And the oil seller said, "Mine is the clearest, the purest oil that you will find in this region." And the old miser said, "Pure? Tell me, how pure? I mean, is it as pure as the water that bubbles from the spring on the edge of the village?" And the oil seller said, "Yes, sir. This is the purest oil in the region. It is as pure as the water that bubbles from the spring at the end of the village." And the old miser said, "But the water that bubbles from the end of the village is free. If I want something that is as pure as the water that bubbles from the spring at the end of the village and costs no more than the water that bubbles from the spring at the end of the village, then we will have water for our meal." And he took the hand of the protesting young miser and led his friend from the shop out of the village down to the spring, where they sat and had a feast of water. And whilst the younger miser may not have been that impressed with his meal, the older miser was very happy. And we shouldn't feel too worried about the younger miser. I mean, he had chosen who to build his life on, whose pattern to follow. And so you and I need to be careful how we choose the people that we follow and the people that we respect. Do we respect the people who are generous of heart and of soul? Or do we respect those who know the price of everything and the value of nothing? And that was the story of the two misers from Pakistan. And that was how I have told it to you.